If you have code that you potentially could be reusing or might need to rewrite in upcoming functions and upcoming gameplay, especially when you're extending the gameplay, the best practice is to build out a function for that. And that's why in this case, we're going to build out a function. We're going to call it messenger. And it's going to take in one value, and that's going to be the message value. And taking the message object that we set up earlier, we're going to update the inner HTML to whatever the value of message is. So that gives us a quick and easy way to use and update our content within message. So now I could go messenger and pass in whatever value we want to send in. And in this case, we're going to do player selection, and we can do a versus there. And then this can be the computer selection, so whatever the computer selected, so that we don't have to look into the console. We can see it being output for the player as they're playing a game. We'll do a line break, and then we can have whatever the result is. So this is where that result value, and that's why I was adding the win in there, so we can simply output the result. And we could have simply output the result, but the problem is when it comes to a draw that the result is actually a tie. So let's add that last one in, and we know that if it's not the player that wins, we know that it's not the computer that wins, then result is going to actually equal a draw. So draw, and then we can say results in a tie. So this way, no matter what happens, the player can see it. They don't have to look inside the console. And before we try that, we need to still add in and close this off because this is passing in a string into the function. So refresh, try it out. We see rock versus paper, computer wins. So the player has rock, the computer had paper, so the computer won that round. They scored 1 there. We've got rock versus scissors, so player wins this time. So now both have a score of 1. And we also have what is being output there. You can also update this as well to be a little bit nicer. So we can change this to small so that that stands out a little bit more. I'm going to copy this over. And so player 2 can be consistent as well. So we've got player 1, player 2. Or we could just have it player and then we could have computer. So we've got player, computer. Player has a score of 1. Rock versus scissors. Player wins. So player got 1. Player has 2-1, 3-1, and that was the draw. So that was the message that gets output within the draw. So draw results in a tie match. So let's do a quick overview and review of what we did in order to wrap up this mini application. So first we built our HTML structure. So all of the different components within our HTML that we're going to need for the gameplay in order to present the player so that they can actually play the game. Next, we selected all of the elements and put them into JavaScript objects so that it's a lot simpler to select those and make use of them within our code. And of course, you don't have to. We could do document query selector every time we want to update that message element. But if we are reusing it, then the best practice is usually to select them into objects, and then we can only need to reference the objects. We set up a global variable, global array called winner so that we can attach score into it. I'm going to get rid of all of the console messages. We've got our buttons, so we're attaching event listeners to the buttons. And then depending on what was clicked on the button, so that's actually going to be the player selection, we needed to have a computer selection. So that's what we did over here. Selecting a third for each one as an option to be returned back. So either rock, paper, or scissors. I'm going to get rid of that console message again. We needed to check to see who won, and that's where we created a quick little function that checks winners. So this is a combination of passing in who selected what. So the first selection is the player, second is computer. We check to see if they're the same, and if it is, then we know that we have a draw. Next, we check to see the win conditions for player. So if the player and if the computer wins, then we know that the computer was the winner here if the player had selected rock. Alternatively, if the computer didn't select paper, then we know that the player wins. And it's always a good idea to double check these and also play through it just to make sure that things are working as intended. So we did the same thing for paper and scissors. And then finally, we wrapped it up by seeing whatever result was returned back. So in this case, we got player. And if the player wins, then we update the result with wins. and then we update winner to +1. So that's that array that we're using globally in order to keep score. And then we check to see if the computer wins, and we do the same thing for computer. And if none of them won, then we know that this is a tie game. So we just know that it's a draw. We output the score value there. And then we set up a separate function that we can easily add messages to the inner HTML of the message element within our page. So go ahead and try this out for yourself. Play through it several times. Make sure it's working. Have some fun with it while practicing JavaScript.